Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to explain how snapping tools work in Blender. Why snapping tools? Because they are kind of tricky, first of all, and also they have changed a lot in the last couple of years. So let's get started. So snapping tools, where are snapping tools? They're here above this 3D viewport. As you can see, these are snapping tools. You can turn them on by clicking on this magnet icon, or you can press Shift+Tab to turn it on. Shift+Tab. Or you can temporarily turn it on while transforming your objects by holding down Ctrl. You can turn on snapping temporarily. So first of all, let's turn it off and duplicate this cube, Shift-D, and move it around here. And let's turn the snapping tools on. You better understand snapping tools in edit mode, so let's go to edit mode. First of all, we need to know two things: snap base and snap target, what they mean. So we need to know that. Snap base is the object that we transform and that we try to snap to something. It can be the entire object, or it can be parts of the object, the elements like vertices and stuff. And snap target is the object that we want to snap to. For example, this object, we want to snap the base meshes elements to this object, for example. So we need to know these two things, and then we can learn these things. So before we learn, let's change snap target to vertex, which is easier for you to understand what's happening. So please change snap target option to vertex before continuing, and then we can continue. We have changed snap target, which is this object that we want to snap to, and we changed to vertex, which means we will snap to the object's vertices. So we need an object, target object, and we need its vertices to snap to. Now we can talk about the snap base options. So first we have closest, what it means. So closest means when we try to snap different elements of the base object to the target, Blender automatically calculates the distance between these elements. For example, it calculates the distance between this vertex and other vertices to the vertices of the target object, and it tries to snap the closest elements together. So what I mean is this: when we try to snap one element, one vertex, for example, it works no matter what. You can snap it to any vertex. But what if we try to snap two vertices to these vertices? Let's go. We can snap like that, right? You snap to the vertex that's under your cursor. That's the element that you're hovering over. So let's snap again, like that. It snaps very well. But what if I want to snap this vertex to this vertex of the target object? Let's try. For example, let's try to snap this vertex here. Let's go, and for some reason it doesn't want to snap. As you can see, it automatically snaps the vertex which is closer to this vertex. So this is what closest means. We can't snap this vertex to there when we have closed option turned on, but we can if we move this object closer there before snapping. Let's select everything and go here, for example, right? And now this vertex is closer to this vertex. Now it simply snaps. It's no problem here, like that. So, or if you want to select all the elements of the object and try to snap, for example, try to put here. I'd like to put this object here. Let's go ahead and try to snap. Bring it here. Kind of, it doesn't want to snap because these elements are not very close to these elements. If we want to snap like that, we first need to bring them closer and then snap, just like that. So closest is interesting and it's useful. It's useful in many situations. If some vertices or some elements of the objects don't want to snap, you bring them closer and then snap. Now, next option in snap base. We are talking about the object that we want to snap to, remember? This is snap base. Now let's talk about not center and median, we will talk about them later. Let's talk about active, what active means. So active means active element. we snap active element no matter what we have selected. So for example, we select multiple vertices. The active vertex will be the vertex that we select the last. So, and it's highlighted in white color, as you can see. Others are orange, I hope you can see. If we select the last vertex, it will be white. And this is the active element. And we bring it, and this vertex will snap to whatever we want to. For example, we want to snap some elements here, this vertex, right? If we bring, it automatically snaps the active element, just like that. For example, let's do something a bit useful. For example, I'd like to put this cube here, just next to the target cube. If we want to put the cube next to this target, this vertex needs to be here. So we need to simply change the active element to this, and let's bring, and we can simply snap. I hope you understand. So this is active element, and the next one, center and median, are very similar to each other. For those who don't understand very well, they might feel like the same thing. For example, median, let's talk about median. Median is this. If you select multiple elements and try to snap to a target, for example, this vertex, median calculates the selection's median point, I mean its center, in other words, and tries to snap that center to whatever you want to snap to. For example, let's try to snap to this. As you can see, it tries to snap the median point of the selection. If we select two vertices and try to snap, it calculates the middle of this edge. We can change this to edge, to see what's happening, just like that. And center also does this, the exact same thing. For example, I changed it to center and it seems like nothing has changed. It still calculates the center of the selection and tries to snap the center to the target. But there is a big difference. Center works based on pivot point. What pivot point we have selected here. A quick reminder about what pivot point is. Pivot point is the center of transformation. For example, if I want to rotate, you can see white dashed line to the center of the object. This is the current pivot point, but we can change the pivot point to 3D cursor, and 3D cursor will be the center of the transformation, or we can just add another cube, select both of them, and change it to, for example, individual origins, and the pivot point for each object will be their own centers. So yeah, this is a quick reminder about the pivot point. So for example, now it's median point, pivot point is median point now, but we can change it to active element, for example. Active element, as I already described, is the last element that we select in sequence. For example, we select this edge first and this edge and then this edge, the last. This will be the active element. So I changed pivot point to active element and I have center in step base, but now it doesn't calculate the center. It simply snaps the active element, as you can see here. It snaps the active element, or we can just change to vertices and we try to snap, it automatically snaps the active element, which is select the last. It is the same as changing it to active. One situation where it can be useful is 3D cursor. For example, you can put your 3D cursor anywhere by right-click, Shift plus right-clicking, as you can see, and you want to snap exactly this part of your mesh to a target, whatever target you want, and you can just change it to center and change pivot point to 3D cursor. And then if you want to select whatever you want from here, for example, and try to snap to, it will snap that position where the 3D cursor was, or we can just select everything and try to snap, just like that. I hope this makes sense, and I hope you can find many useful cases for that. Let's change it back. And yeah, these are snap base options. Now we can continue with snap target. Let's change this to closest, which is the default, and let's talk about these snap target options. Many of them are more useful than others. So yeah, some of them are very frequently used, some of them are not. So the default one is increment. What it does is we don't need an object for incremental snapping because it snaps to the imaginary grid. It's not imaginary, it's the grid that we can see here. So these square shapes, this is the grid. It snaps incrementally by grid unit. By grid unit, I mean the unit that is used to measure these squares. We can change it from here, scene and units. By default, it's 1 meter. So if I move our object, it moves by 1 meter each time. This is increment, and when we are in increment mode, we can turn on absolute increment snap, which is the same as changing this to grid snapping. It tries to snap to the grid, for example. In object mode, it snaps the origin point, but in edit mode, it simply snaps to the grid. For example, if I move, now it's snapping to the grid, exactly, as you can see here. So it's snapping to the grid lines. It aligns the object clearly on the grid lines, as you can see here. But in increment, if I turn on absolute increment snap, let's turn this off in order to change it in a random position to a random position. And now if I turn this on without absolute increment snap, it just snaps by just units. It doesn't snap to the grid. As you can see, if I want to snap this line exactly on this grid line, it doesn't snap. But if I turn this absolute increment snap, it snaps to the grid. I don't know, it seems like these two things are doing the same thing as this one grid option. So grid simply snaps to the grid. That's it. Vertex, we have talked about Vertex. It tries to snap to the other target objects vertices. Edge will snap to target objects edges, as you can see here, but you can slide around the edge, any edge. Face, it simply snaps to the face of the object, any face, as you can see from here. So volume, that's something which is less frequently used. It tries to snap to the center of the volume. In this case, it might not be very useful, but in Blender documentation, you can see an example, and I will repeat that here. So this works well when you are snapping the bones of a character inside the character volume. For example, you try to keep the bones of arm inside the arm object so that it doesn't go out of the arm object. You turn on volume snapping and move the bones inside that arm mesh, and it doesn't go out of that. So yeah, very specific purposes. Next is edge center. It's the same as edge, but it snaps to the center. It doesn't allow us to slide around the edge. It doesn't allow sliding along the edge. Just snaps to the center. Edge perpendicular, it's kind of very specific situation. Let me try to explain. Although it will be difficult. I forgot to change it to edge perpendicular because there should be a kind of line. It calculates the older position and the new position of the elements that we want to snap to, and it draws a line between these two positions, and the line should be perpendicular to the edge that we're snapping to. So I don't know where it can be used. If it was not useful, it wouldn't be here. I think it is useful in some situations. That's why we have this option. But I haven't used it in situations. Maybe it's useful. Let's go. So the next two options are the So what this face project and face nears do, what these do is try to shrink wrap the base object onto the target object. It basically tries to work like shrink wrap modifier here. Shrink wrap modifier has many more options. So I highly recommend using shrink wrap modifier for something like this. But let's see how it works. Let's turn off this guy, turn on For example, face nearest tries to work like shrink wrap, and it's a little better. As you can see here, it shrink wraps onto the target object's uneven surface. So, but for these purposes, shrink wrap modifier works much better, and it's non-destructive. Let's go to Vertex and see what we have. Align rotation to target, backface culling. Align rotation to target is better understood when we are working in object mode. So it's one of the things that are very easy to understand. Let's go to solid view, Shift A, let's bring it a cone. And now I want to snap this cone to this faces of this object, right? Let's go to face. In object mode, I'm in object mode, remember, and I'm snapping, as you can see. I can snap to this face, I can snap to this face, to any face actually, as you can see. But it doesn't look exactly like it's snapping, right? It's just kind of not very understandable. But when we turn on align rotation target, it tries to align the up position according to the surface normal. If you know what I say, what I mean, just like that. As you can see, it's much better. It is more useful in object mode like this, when you're positioning objects on top of a surface. So next option is backface culling. Backface culling is also very specific. Just maybe there is a mistake here, I don't know. Backface culling means we don't snap to the elements that we cannot see. For example, there is one vertex behind this cube, here, that we don't see, let's say, and we don't want to snap to that vertex. We can't snap to that anyway, right? Even without we turn this on, we can snap. As you know, we can snap to this, let's change this to vertex actually. We can snap to this vertex, any vertex that we can see, but we can't snap to the vertex that we cannot see, even without turning this on. So, but there is a situation, Shift Z in wireframe view. If you can't go to wireframe, you can go from here too. But in wireframe view, we can snap to that vertex, as you can see. The vertex that we didn't see in solid view, we can snap. Even in wireframe view, if we don't want to snap to the vertex that we shouldn't see, we should turn this on. So if we turn this on now we cannot snap to the vertex that's behind this cube. This is what it does. But in solid view, we don't need that. It simply works like backface culling turned on. So yeah, it's very specific. And yeah, next one, select exclude non-selectable in object mode, but in edit mode there is more options here, as you can see. So let's talk about exclude non-selectable now. Exclude non-selectable means we can't snap to objects which we cannot select. For example, let's turn selection off for this object. Now we can select this cube, but we cannot select this cube. And if I don't want to snap to the cube which I cannot select, I simply turn this on. We exclude the objects which we cannot select. Now I cannot snap to this specific situation. And in edit mode, there are more options here. Include active. Include active, it's an interesting situation. When we have multiple meshes inside one object, as you can see, this is one object, this is a separate object, but we have multiple meshes, right, inside one object. If we want to snap them to each other, just like that, we should keep this on, include active. If we turn this off, we can't snap to the kind of neighboring meshes inside one object. Include edited. When multiple objects are in edit mode, we can snap to each other. These are separate objects, but all of them are in edit mode, and we can snap to each other. We can snap this to that, we can snap this to this, it doesn't matter. But if we turn this off, we cannot snap to the other objects which are in edit mode. Again, very specific situations. And include non-edited is For example, this object is in edit mode, but this object is not in edit mode, but we still can snap. If we turn this off, we cannot snap to objects which are not in edit mode. Basically, these are some elements which options that you shouldn't touch most of the time. So the next options are affect. What transform operations we should affect when we're snapping? In what situation should we be able to snap? So by default, only moving. While moving, we snap, right? We snap while moving, but we can turn on rotation, which means we can snap to targets while rotating. As you can see, we hover over any element and we try to snap rotation. And there is an interesting situation here. By default, I'm in Vertex, but I change to Increment, and especially it's useful in rotation. We can incrementally rotate by whatever degree we specify here, for example 25 degrees, and now we can snap or incrementally rotate this by 25 degrees. So, and scaling, it is the same thing. Snapping works while we are scaling, or we can change this to Vertex, and while we scale we can snap to this. And this is a useful situation. For example, if I want to scale this and also be able to snap, I can turn this on and I can snap while I'm scaling. And this little guy, while in increment mode, while in rotating, this is smaller increment, this is bigger increment, and this is turned on when we press shift while we're rotating. For example, I'm rotating by 25 degrees, but if I press shift, I'm now rotating by 1 degree, which is specified here. I almost forgot to mention about the new feature in Blender. It's not new now, but it wasn't in Blender for a long time. It's selecting snap base while transforming. For example, if I move this and try to put this on top of the other cube, I can, while moving, I can press B and select the snap base, for example this vertex, and I can snap even if I don't turn on snapping. I don't turn on snapping, but I temporarily turn on while just pressing B. You don't have to press anything else, no control, no shift tab, nothing. While moving or while rotating, while scaling, you press B and select snap base, and then move and snap to anywhere you want. That's an excellent new feature which was really helpful. So yeah, that's almost everything. We have complete Blender courses for beginners and for more advanced users, and I will leave the links in the description. You can support us by getting those courses, and you can also support Blender Foundation by getting those courses. So thank you. See you in the next video.